And I think it's immoral because I think it stands in the way of real progress. So the book is about radical things like getting people to stop asking this question, what percentage of my donation goes to the cause? It's about giving charities enormously greater freedom to spend money on things that we typically call overhead and think of, as a result of that, negatively, so that they can raise enormously greater sums of money and have some hope of achieving some fraction of the scale of these gigantic problems they're chartered to confront. To me, it's all about scale. So I'm on kind of an Al Gore-like mission to really change people's minds about this whole arena of charity. I'm going to give you a few statistics. In 1997, UNAIDS estimated that 1.1 million adults and children died of AIDS in the world. 10 years later, despite the introduction of protease inhibitors, that number had doubled, and UNAIDS estimated that 2.1 million adults and children died of AIDS in the world. In 1997, when we were starting the Breast Cancer 3 Days, 43,000 American women died of breast cancer. 10 years later, that number hadn't changed very much. 41,000 American women died of breast cancer in 2007. In 1992, the United Nations estimated that there were 824 million people malnourished in the world. And 10 years later, that number really hadn't changed very much. They estimated that there were 820 million people malnourished in the world. And I don't believe that this is the kind of world we want to live in. You know, we don't want to live in a world where this massive human suffering seems inevitable and seems intractable, like it's going to go on forever. We want to live in a world where we've found a cure for breast cancer, and we don't have to worry about our mothers or our sisters or our wives dying of breast cancer. We want to live in a world where we've put AIDS behind us, where we've put hunger and poverty behind us. So I've tried to ask a big question in this book. I'm not asking questions about how we can ratchet up nonprofit performance another 5%. The question I've tried to ask in the book is this system that we currently have capable of achieving what I call Apollo-like, as in walking on the moon, aspirations, on a timeline that dignifies the value of a human life? So not the cure for breast cancer 50 years off in the distance or whenever it comes, but 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So it's really a book about dreams, because I believe that for too long we have been estranged from our real dreams, our most powerful dreams, if we were to actually state them. You know, you're meant to feel embarrassed if you talk about something like the end of the AIDS epidemic in the next 10 years, or God forbid, you know, the end of homelessness on Skid Row in Los Angeles in the next 7 years. Sure, we got to the moon in 8 years, but there's no way we could possibly end homelessness on Skid Row in the next 7 years. You know, sophisticated people will label you a naive idealist if you talk in those terms. So my sense is that we have lowered our horizons to the management of this suffering, and to the expectation that it's going to continue, and to the acceptance of a system that doesn't promise very much more. So the book is entitled Uncharitable. Some people said I should have had a more positive title. People who know me know that for me that's a very positive title. But I wanted it felt to me like we have a big problem here and nobody's really talking about it. And any system that doesn't have its sights set on anything more than getting a charity navigator seal of approval to prove to the public how efficient they are is the opposite of real charity. And we need to abandon our loyalty to it, and we need to reach for something greater. And ultimately, I think we need to redefine the moral high ground. The moral high ground is currently occupied by whoever sacrifices the most, right? I think the moral high ground ought to be occupied by whoever alleviates the greatest suffering, whether they're sacrificing or not. So my observation in the book is that we have two rule books. We have one for charity, and we have one for the rest of the economic world. And a lot of people blame capitalism for creating these inequities in our society, presumably because capitalism is a very powerful thing. But then we refuse to allow the nonprofit sector to use the tools of capitalism to rectify those inequities. So I looked at the way this rule book discriminates against the nonprofit sector in 5 different areas. The first of those is compensation. So in the for-profit sector, aside from these ridiculous CEO salaries, for the most part, people pay a competitive wage based on the value that gets produced. But we don't like to see people make a lot of money in charity. We have a visceral reaction to the notion that anyone would make very much money in charity. And that's why I asked that question earlier, because I see that it gives young people these mutually exclusive choices between doing well and doing good, and sends a lot of people from our best universities and law schools and business schools marching directly into the for-profit sector without really even considering the nonprofit sector because of the financial sacrifice that ethic requires. Business Week did a survey of Stanford MBAs 10 years out of B school and looked at what their total compensation was. And this was at an average age of about 38. And the average Stanford, the median compensation package for a Stanford MBA was $400,000. But the average salary of the CEO of a medical charity in the United States was $232,000. And the average salary of the CEO of a hunger charity was $84,000. Now think about that for just a second. There's no way you're going to get very many people with a $400,000 annual earning potential to make a $316,000 annual sacrifice to become the CEO of a hunger charity. It's literally cheaper for that person to donate $100,000 a year to the hunger charity and get like a $50,000 tax deduction, still be about $250,000 ahead of the game, be called a philanthropist, have power over the nonprofit organization because you're their funder, and have a lifetime of earning potential still ahead of you. Now, who would trade that for this? These are the salaries of the 5 highest paid executives in health charities in America in 2002. So this is the American Cancer Society at $415,000, the head of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the Salk Institute, the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation at $460,000, and the Stowers Medical Institute at $717,000. In the wrong context, these salaries are meant to sound scandalous. You know, if you compare that to the salary of somebody making minimum wage, this sounds scandalous. Or you can sort of hear the evening news anchor saying to you, and you thought that your hard-earned donations were going to find a cure for juvenile diabetes. But in reality, the money is going to pay the $500,000 pay package of the honcho who's running the organization. And that makes you angry because of the context in which it's placed. But let's apply these salaries to a different scale and simply look at them compared to the 5 highest paid executives in private health insurance. So we're still talking about health. And you'll see that these slivers that you can no longer see here, those are the salaries that we were just looking at, that the media makes us think are scandalous. And the head of Aetna made almost $9 million, same with United Health, Coventry $21.7 million, WellPoint $21.8 million, Oxford Health Plans $76 million. So the charity executives combined made $2.5 million.